The air in the grand concourse was always cold. It was a deep cold that seeped through the thin soles of work boots and settled in the bones. Yuna moved her polishing machine in slow, steady circles. The machine hummed, a low sound that was swallowed by the immense silence of the hall. Before her, the obsidian floor stretched out, so vast and so perfectly black it seemed like a sheet of solid night. Her own reflection was a ghost in its surface, a pale smudge in the gray worker's uniform. This was her world. 5 days a week, for 10 hours a day, she made the floor shine. The Krylix, who owned the palace and the empire it ruled, demanded perfection. A smudge was a sign of disorder. A speck of dust was an insult. Yuna did not mind the work. It was simple. There was a clear goal: make it clean. She could lose herself in the rhythm of it, her arms moving back and forth, the soft whir of the polisher her only companion. She was working on a section near the base of a giant statue. The statue was of some long-dead Krylix emperor, all sharp angles and snarling muzzle, carved from a blood-red stone. As she polished, a tiny, almost invisible flaw caught her eye. It was a scuff mark, probably from the heel of a guard's boot. Anyone else would have missed it. The head of the sanitation corps never checked this far into the corner. But Yuna saw it. It was a break in the perfect darkness, a faint gray line. She stopped the machine. With a soft cloth from her pocket, she knelt. She sprayed a tiny amount of solvent onto the mark and began to work at it with her fingers, buffing gently. She did not rush. She applied just the right amount of pressure. After a few minutes, the mark was gone. The floor was once again a single, unbroken sheet of mirrored blackness. She sat back on her heels, looking at her work. A small feeling of satisfaction warmed her against the chill of the hall. Yuna. The whisper came from behind her. She turned to see Chol approaching, his own polisher silent at his side. His round face was pinched with worry. "They're coming," he said, his voice low. "The victory procession. The Scarred One is back. The Scarred One. General Tyke, Supreme Commander of the Krylix Armada." Yuna had never seen him, but she had heard the stories. He was a legend, a warrior who had conquered a dozen star systems. His name was spoken with a mix of fear and deep respect. The Krylix were a warrior race, tall and powerful, with thick fur and eyes that glowed like embers. Humans like Yuna and Chul were newcomers to their empire. Earth had been integrated, not destroyed, but humans were at the bottom. They were laborers, technicians, cleaners, weak, fragile. "We should finish and go," Chul urged, his eyes darting towards the great arched entrance of the hall. "I don't want to be in the way." Yuna nodded and stood up. Together they moved their equipment to the side, tucking the polishers and cloths into a small service alcove. They took their places against the wall with the other human cleaners, a line of gray in the shadow of the towering red statues. The air began to change. A low, rhythmic thrum started to vibrate through the floor, a sound like a giant heartbeat. Then they entered. First came the honor guard. They were massive Krylix soldiers in polished black armor that gleamed under the lights. They marched in perfect, terrifying unison, their steps echoing like thunder in the hall. Their faces were stern, their eyes fixed ahead. They carried long, sleek rifles that hummed with contained energy. The sheer power of them made Yuna want to shrink back into the wall. After the guards came the officers, their armor decorated with silver and bronze. And then he entered, General Tyke. He was even larger than Yuna had imagined. His armor was not polished to a high shine like his guards. It was scuffed and scarred, marked with the evidence of real battle. A long, pale streak cut across the dark metal over his chest. Another marred the shoulder plate. His fur was a dark gray, and his muzzle was marked by an old silvery scar that ran from his brow to his jaw. His eyes, a piercing amber, did not stare blankly ahead. They scanned the hall, taking in everything. He moved not with the stiff march of his soldiers, but with a loose, powerful gait. This was a creature who owned every space he walked into. The procession moved down the center of the concourse. The officials of the court, who had gathered on a raised platform, bowed their heads in respect. Yuna held her breath, trying to be as small and invisible as possible. As General Tyke passed the section of floor where Yuna had been working, his head was high, his gaze sweeping the courtiers. But then his pace faltered, just for a single step. His right foot, clad in a heavy armored boot, came down on the exact spot where Yuna had removed the scuff mark. The boot was not clean. It was dusted with a fine, pale orange powder, the soil of some distant, conquered world. His head dipped. His amber eyes looked down at the floor. He saw his own reflection staring back at him from the perfect, flawless obsidian. The reflection was clear and sharp, a testament to the quality of the work. For a long moment he was still, a giant of war and power contemplating his own image in the mirror-like stone. Then slowly his gaze lifted. It did not go to the bowing courtiers. It did not go to his officers. It moved to the side, to the line of gray-clad cleaners pressed against the wall. His eyes moved past the others and stopped on Yuna. He looked directly at her. Yuna's heart seemed to stop. His eyes were intense, intelligent, and deeply unsettling. She saw the scar, the weariness in his face, the sharp intelligence in his gaze. She felt frozen. She was holding the small bottle of specialized polishing solvent in her hand, her fingers tight around it. He saw it. His eyes flicked down to the bottle, then back to her face. He took in her simple clothes, her nervous posture, the focused, watchful look in her own eyes that had not yet had time to turn to fear. In that silent, electric second, a connection was made. He, the conqueror, saw her, the cleaner. He saw the cause of the perfection he had just witnessed. Just as quickly, the moment ended. Yuna, remembering her place, dropped her gaze to the floor, bowing her head deeply. The general gave no sign of acknowledgement. He turned his head forward and continued his march, his booted feet once again echoing through the hall. The procession moved on, leaving the cleaners in the sudden ringing silence. Chul let out a shaky breath beside her. "By the stars, Yuna. He looked right at you." Yuna could only nod, her heart now pounding in her chest. She unclenched her hand from the bottle, her knuckles white. She felt a strange mix of terror and something else, something she could not name. It was the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in years, not as a human, not as a cleaner, but as a person. And the one who had seen her was the most dangerous creature in the galaxy. The hall was empty now, save for the line of cleaners. The perfect floor reflected the high, distant ceiling, but something had changed. The air was different. A single small event, as tiny and significant as a scuff mark on an endless black floor, had just altered the course of the future. And Yuna, standing there with her bottle of polish, had no idea. The days after the procession fell back into their normal rhythm. The hum of the polisher, the chill of the air, the ghostly reflection in the obsidian floor. Yuna worked, and she tried to forget the feeling of the general's amber eyes on her. Chul mentioned it a few times, his voice full of nervous excitement, but when Yuna did not reply, he let it drop. It was easier to believe it was nothing. A great lord might glance at a piece of furniture. It did not mean he was interested in the carpenter. So when a Krylix guard, clad in the same black armor as the honor guard, stopped by their cleaning station, Yuna assumed he was there to inspect their work. She kept her head down, focusing on a stubborn spot on the floor grout. "You," the guard's voice was a low rumble. He was pointing at Yuna. "Come with me." Chul shot her a look of pure panic. Yuna's own heart jumped into her throat. Had she missed a spot? Had someone complained? She put down her cloth and stood, her legs feeling weak. The guard did not explain. He simply turned and walked, expecting her to follow. He did not lead her to a disciplinary office or the head of sanitation. Instead, they walked through corridors she had never seen, away from the public halls and into the private areas of the palace. The walls here were a dull, brushed metal, and the air smelled of ozone and something else, something sharp and wild. It was the smell of the Krylix themselves. The guard stopped before a large, unadorned door. It slid open with a hiss. "Enter. Wait for the general," he said, and then he left her there, standing alone in the doorway. Trembling, Yuna stepped inside. The room was unlike any part of the palace she had ever cleaned. It was a strategy room. One entire wall was a glowing star map, dotted with hundreds of lights. A large, solid table in the center of the room was covered with data slates, scattered star charts, and the remains of a meal. In the corner, a complex holographic simulation of a star system flickered, ships and tactical readouts moving in a silent, complicated dance. It was a controlled chaos, the nest of a busy and powerful mind, and it was messy. There was a fine layer of dust on some of the lower shelves. A stack of data slates was perilously close to toppling over. Yuna's cleaner instincts itched to tidy it, but she stayed frozen by the door. General Tyke entered a moment later. He was not in his full ceremonial armor, but wore a simpler dark gray tunic and pants. Without the bulk of the armor, he seemed even taller, his shoulders broad and powerful. The scar on his muzzle seemed more pronounced. He looked at her, and those same amber eyes pinned her in place. "You." The one from the concourse, he said. His voice was quieter than in the great hall, but it still held a note of command. Yuna bowed her head deeply, unable to speak. He walked over to the cluttered table and picked up an object. It was a piece of armor, but not Krylek's design. It was smaller, more intricate, made of a pale, polished wood and lacquer with inlaid mother-of-pearl that was clouded with grime. "This is from the Zolotians," he said, holding it out to her. "We annexed their world last cycle. Their art is delicate. My soldiers tried to clean it. They used sonic scrubbers and plasma torches. They almost destroyed it." He placed the fragile chest plate on the table in front of her. "They do not understand subtlety. They see dirt and they attack it. You saw a scuff mark on an indestructible obsidian floor." He paused, his gaze intense. "Clean this. Do not damage it. This was not a request. It was an order." But the nature of the order was so strange, so unexpected, that Yuna's fear was pushed aside by a wave of professional curiosity. She slowly approached the table. She looked at the chest plate. The lacquer was gummed with a sticky organic residue, and the mother-of-pearl was dull. She could see where aggressive cleaning had left tiny hairline scratches in the soft wood. "May I see the cleaning supplies you have?" she asked, her voice a whisper. The general gestured to a cabinet. Inside was a jumble of harsh chemicals and powerful tools, all designed for military-grade cleaning, for blast marks and engine grease, not for ancient art. Yuna shook her head. "I cannot use these. They will destroy the lacquer." She thought for a moment. I need warm water, a very soft, clean cloth, and would there be any plant-based oil? Like from a kitchen?" General Tyke watched her, his head tilted. He did not question her. He went to a comm panel on the wall and spoke a few low words. Within minutes, a junior aide appeared with a bowl of warm water, a pile of soft linens, and a small vial of cooking oil. Yuna got to work. She forgot the general was there. She forgot she was in the private chamber of the most feared warrior in the sector. This was a problem to be solved. She dipped a corner of a cloth in the warm water, wrung it out completely, and began to gently wipe away the surface grime. She was patient. She changed the cloth often so she wouldn't grind the dirt back in. For the sticky residue, she used a tiny, tiny drop of oil on a fresh cloth, testing it on a small hidden spot first. The oil gently loosened the grime without damaging the lacquer underneath. She buffed it away with a dry part of the cloth. As she worked, the general did not sit. He paced slowly around the room, looking at the star charts, occasionally tapping the holographic simulation. But Yuna could feel his attention on her. He was observing her, not just her work, but her. Her patience, her focus, the careful, respectful way she handled the object. After nearly 2 hours, she was done. The wooden base glowed with a soft, warm light. The mother-of-pearl inlay shone, its colors shimmering. The chest plate looked new, yet all its history was preserved. She placed it carefully back on the table. General Tyke came over and picked it up. He turned it over in his large clawed hands. He ran a thumb over the smooth, now gleaming surface. He did not smile. Yuna was not sure if Krylek could smile, but he gave a slow, deep nod. "Good," he said. A single word of praise. It felt like winning a great award. He put the chest plate down and turned to the flickering hologram in the corner. It showed 2 fleets of ships engaged in a battle around a blue gas giant. "My tacticians are stuck," he said, almost to himself. "The simulation has been running for days. A stalemate." He pointed a claw at the hologram. "They tell me the key is to break the enemy's center formation." Yuna looked at the beautiful, confusing light show. She did not understand fleet tactics. She saw the big ships in the center and the smaller ships on the flanks. It looked like a game she had no idea how to play. Thinking the general was just thinking out loud, she remained silent. Then her eyes, trained to see what others missed, drifted away from the big, bright ships. They went to the edges of the simulation, to the background. There on the left flank of the friendly fleet was a cloud. A nebula, the simulation labeled it. It was small and looked insignificant. But the data readout next to it flickered inconsistently. It showed gravitational instability. "It is just a nebula," the general said, noticing her gaze. "Non-strategic. The sensors are unreliable inside it. Both sides are avoiding it." Yuna, emboldened by her success with the chest plate, spoke without thinking. "The floor?" "In the halls. Sometimes there is a spot that looks clean, but if the light hits it wrong, you see a thin film of dust. It makes the floor cloudy. You can slip." She pointed a timid finger at the flickering nebula on the hologram. That cloud. It is like the dust. It is unstable. If you have to retreat, it would be a bad place to go. It would cloud your vision. She immediately clamped her mouth shut, feeling foolish. She was talking about dust on floors to a galactic general, but General Tech had gone very still. He was staring at the nebula. His tacticians had dismissed it. The simulation's own algorithms had labeled it a low-priority environmental hazard. They were focused on the brute force of the enemy's center. But this human, this cleaner, had seen a different kind of problem. She had seen a hidden flaw, a tiny crack that could cause a great fall. He turned from the hologram and looked at her. This time his gaze was different. It was not the curious look from the hall, or the testing look from when she started cleaning. This was a look of dawning, genuine respect. "You see the world differently," he stated, his voice low and thoughtful. Una simply bowed her head again, her heart pounding. She had no idea that her simple observation about a dusty floor had just identified the critical weakness in his enemy's strategy. She only knew that the scary general was looking at her as if she had just given him a key to a great treasure, and in a way she had. The air in the general's strategy room became a familiar, if always intimidating, space for Una. She was not summoned every day, but often enough. The orders were always the same. A guard would appear and say, "The general requires your service." The tasks were never about war. They were about things his soldiers did not understand. He would have her restore an old data drive, its casing corroded. He would ask her to organize a collection of captured star charts that were in a hopeless jumble. Once he pointed to a wilting plant in an ornate pot by the window. It was a strange purple-leafed thing from a tropical world. "It is dying," he had stated. "The medics say there is no disease." Una had put down her cloths and approached the plant. She did not look at the leaves first. She looked at the pot. It was beautiful but small. Gently, she touched the soil, then tried to wiggle the base of the plant. It did not move. It was root-bound, choked by its own container. "It is not sick," she said softly. "It has no more room to grow. Its roots are trapped. It needs a bigger pot." She looked at the general. "Sometimes strength is not about fighting sickness. It is about having the space to become strong." General Tyke had watched her, his amber eyes unblinking. He did not reply, but the next day the plant was in a new, larger pot. During these sessions he began to talk. He did not talk about battles or glory. He asked questions. "Your people," he began one day as she was carefully cleaning the dust from the star map. "They were conquered, yet they do not seem broken." "Why?" Una paused, considering her words. "We are good at adapting," she said. "We focus on what we can build, even in a small space. A family, a garden, a clean floor. It is a different kind of strength." "Loyalty," he said on another occasion. "My soldiers are loyal to the chain of command, to the Empire. It is simple." "Is it the same for humans?" Una thought of Chul, of her parents back on Earth. "It is more complicated. Our loyalty is to people, to those who are kind to us, to those we care for. It is like a net with many connections, not a single chain." He listened. He truly listened, his head tilted, his powerful body still. He was learning. And Una slowly was becoming less afraid. He was fierce, yes, but he was not cruel. He was curious. This did not go unnoticed. The Grand Minister, a tall, severe Krylix with fur the color of frost, had always disliked the presence of humans in the palace. He believed it made the Krylix look weak. When he heard rumors that the Supreme General was spending hours with a human cleaner, his disgust grew. When he confirmed it, seeing Una being escorted to Tyke's chambers, his disgust turned to outrage. He confronted Tyke in the Grand Concourse in the very hall where it had all begun. The polished floor reflected their two opposing figures. "This is an insult, General." The Grand Minister's voice cut through the air. "You spend your time with this primitive creature. She clouds your mind. She will make us soft. The strength of the Krylix is in our purity and our power, not in listening to the chattering of a conquered species." A crowd had gathered. Courtiers, officials, guards. Joel was there, hidden in a service doorway, his face pale with fear for his friend. Una, who had been on her way to clean a nearby anteroom, stood frozen, wishing the obsidian floor would swallow her whole. General Tyke stood his ground. He looked from the Grand Minister to Una, and then his gaze swept over the assembled court. "You speak of strength, Minister." Tyke's voice was calm. but it carried to every corner of the hall. You see it only as the power to break, to conquer, and we have conquered much. Our empire is vast. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. But what have we built? We conquer a world, take its resources, and move on. We leave behind dust and resentment. We are stretched thin. We are fracturing from within because we know only how to take, not how to hold, not how to nurture. He took a step toward Yuna, his eyes fixed on her. You call her primitive, but she possesses a strength we have forgotten. The strength to preserve, to mend, to see the universe not as a thing to be dominated, but as a system to be understood. She can clean a floor until it is a perfect mirror. She can restore a broken artifact without leaving a scratch. She can see the hidden flaw in a battle simulation that my best tacticians missed. The Grand Minister scoffed. So you would have her as a pet? A consultant? This is beneath you, General. Tyke's eyes flashed. You misunderstand me completely. He turned to face the entire court. His voice rose, filled with a conviction that silenced all whispers. This woman, Yuna, does not have the strength of a soldier. She has the strength of a queen. She sees the roots of a problem, not just the branches. She understands that true power is not just in winning a war, but in building a peace that lasts. He looked directly at Yuna, his gaze unwavering. I do not ask her to be my consort. I do not invite her to be my advisor. He took a final deep breath, and his declaration echoed through the immense space. I declare that this woman, Yuna, shall be my queen. Her wisdom will be the foundation upon which we build a lasting peace, not just an endless war. She will help me rule not as a symbol, but as a voice. The voice we have been missing. For a moment there was absolute silence. The Grand Minister looked as if he had been struck. The courtiers stared in stunned disbelief. Chul's mouth hung open. Yuna felt the world tilt. The polished floor, the towering ceiling, the faces of the crowd, it all swam before her eyes. Queen? It was a word from a different life, an impossible word. She was a cleaner. She polished floors. This was a mistake, a terrible dream. She looked at General Tyke. He was not looking at the court. He was looking only at her. In his eyes she saw no joke, no trick. She saw that same respect she had seen in his strategy room, but now it was magnified 1,000 times. He was serious. He saw something in her that she had never seen in herself. He was offering her not just a title, but a purpose far greater than cleaning a hall. And in that silent, terrifying, world-shattering moment, standing on the perfect floor she had polished with her own hands, Yuna knew that her life was over and a new, impossible one was beginning. The silence in the Grand Concourse did not last. It broke into a wave of shocked whispers and angry rumbles. The Grand Minister's face twisted with fury. He could not openly defy the general, the war hero, but the law was his weapon. A queen. The minister spat, his voice cutting through the noise. You cannot simply declare this, Tyke. The consort of the ruler must be of proven worth. They must pass the trial of ascension. It is ancient law. The trial of ascension. A chill went through the crowd. It was a rite from a more brutal time, designed to test the mettle of a potential mate. Many had tried. Many had failed. No one had undergone the trial in generations. General Take's expression darkened. The trial is a barbaric relic. It is a test of brute force, nothing more. I will not subject her to it. Then she cannot be recognized, the Grand Minister declared, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. The law is clear. If you will not uphold our oldest traditions, you undermine your own authority. She remains a cleaner, and you are a general who breaks his own people's laws. Yuna stood between them, her heart pounding. She understood the conflict. Tyke's power was immense, but it was built on the structure of Krylik's society. To break its laws too openly would make him a tyrant, not a leader. The traditionalist would never follow him. The empire would fracture. All eyes were on her. She felt the weight of them, heavy and judging. They saw a small, fragile human. They expected her to cry, to faint, to run away. They expected weakness, but Yuna had spent her life working patiently in the shadows. She had faced the immense cold scale of the palace every day and had not been broken by it. This was just another vast, intimidating hall. Tyke was prepared to fight for her, but that would cause a war within the empire. She would not let that happen. He had seen a strength in her. It was time to prove it was real. She took a small step forward. Her voice was quiet, but it carried in the tense silence. I will do it, she said. The whispers stopped. Tyke turned to her, his eyes wide with surprise. Yuna, no. You do not understand. The trial, It is designed for Krylix warriors. It is deadly. The law is the law, Yuna said, looking not at Tyke but at the Grand Minister. She saw the smug satisfaction in his eyes. He was sure she would fail. I will take the trial. The Grand Minister smiled, a cold, sharp expression. So be it. The trial begins at dawn. The glimmering caves were not far from the palace, but they felt like a different world. The entrance was a jagged tear in the side of a mountain, breathing out air that was cold and damp and smelled of strange minerals. The Krylix crowd gathered at a safe distance, their faces a mix of curiosity and grim expectation. General Tyke stood apart, his arms crossed, his body rigid with tension. The Grand Minister explained the rules. Deep within the cave system lies the Heartstone, a crystal that glows with its own light. Your task is to enter, retrieve it, and return before the second sun reaches its peak. You will be accompanied by 3 of our finest warriors to observe. He gestured, and 3 hulking Krylix soldiers stepped forward. Their job was not to help. It was to report her failure, or her death. Yuna was given a simple pack with water and a light. She wore a sturdy set of clothes, not her cleaner's uniform, but not armor either. She looked small and hopeless next to the armored giants who were to be her witnesses. With a deep breath, she walked into the darkness. The caves were alive. The walls glittered with 1,000 tiny embedded crystals that gave off a faint, disorienting glow. It was not a clean light. It pulsed and shifted, making shadows dance and twist. The air was thick with a mist that carried a sharp, metallic taste. Almost immediately, Yuna felt dizzy. This was the cave's first defense, a psychic disorientation that confused the mind. Behind her, the Krylix warriors activated the scanners on their wrists, trying to map a path. The screens flickered and spat nonsense. The cave's minerals blocked their technology. One of them growled in frustration and slammed his fist against the wall. Yuna did not have a scanner. She had her eyes and her instincts. She ignored the big, obvious tunnels that seemed to lead straight down. Those were traps. Instead, she did what she always did. She looked for the details everyone else missed. She stopped, holding her own small light close to the floor. She was looking for dust. Not just any dust, but the patterns in it. In one tunnel, the dust was evenly settled. In another, a smaller, less noticeable opening, she saw faint, almost invisible lines in the dust. A tiny, steady current of air was flowing from it. This way, she said softly. The warriors scoffed. That is a rabbit hole. It leads nowhere. Yuna did not argue. She simply started crawling into the smaller tunnel. Grudgingly, the warriors, who were too large to fit easily, had to get on their hands and knees to follow. The path was difficult. It twisted and turned, but the air in this tunnel was clearer. The disorienting glow was weaker. She was following the cave's natural ventilation, the same way she would notice a draft in a palace hall. They came to a large chamber split by a deep crevasse. A narrow natural bridge of stone crossed it. One of the warriors, confident in his strength, strode onto the bridge. But the stone was slick with a damp, algae-like growth. His boot slipped. He fell, his armored fingers scrambling at the edge. The other 2 soldiers managed to haul him back up, shocked. The brute force they relied on had almost gotten him killed. Yuna knelt by the edge of the crevasse. She could feel a stronger, cooler draft rising from it. She took a small stone and dropped it. She counted, but heard no sound of it hitting the bottom. It was a dead end. She then looked at the walls. The glittering crystals were here, but in one section, they were a different color. A soft, steady blue, not the shifting green and purple of the rest. She saw that tiny root-like veins of these blue crystals formed a barely noticeable, narrow path along the wall, a treacherous but possible ledge. We have to go across there, she said, pointing. The warriors refused. It was too dangerous. They decided to go back and find another way. Yuna watched them go, their figures swallowed by the pulsing green mist. She was alone, her heart hammered against her ribs, but the fear was familiar. It was the same fear she felt on her first day in the palace, faced with the endless obsidian floor. You did not look at the whole impossible task. You looked at the next step. She turned her back on the main tunnel and began to inch her way along the narrow blue crystal ledge, her face pressed against the cold, damp stone. It was slow and terrifying, but the blue crystals felt solid and true under her hands. The ledge led her to a passage that sloped gently downward. The air grew cooler and cleaner. The disorienting mist faded. And then she saw it. In a small, quiet grotto at the end of the passage, resting on a pedestal of pure white stone, was the Heartstone. It was not large, but it glowed with a warm, gentle, and steady light. It was beautiful. She walked forward and picked it up. It was cool to the touch. She placed it carefully in her pack and began the journey back. When she emerged from the cave entrance, blinking in the sunlight, the crowd gasped. She was scratched and dirty, her clothes torn, but she was alive and walking on her own power. In her hand, she held the glowing Heartstone. The 3 Krylix warriors had emerged just moments before, empty-handed and shamed. They had been defeated by the cave's illusions and their own reliance on force. Yuna walked past the stunned Grand Minister and stopped in front of General Tyke. She held out the Heartstone. He took it, his eyes looking from the crystal to her face. He saw the quiet determination in her eyes, the same look she had when she polished a floor or restored a broken artifact. She had not won by being a warrior. She had won by being exactly who she was. She had seen the details they had all missed. He looked at the defeated warriors and then at the Grand Minister. He did not need to say a word. The proof was right there, shining in his hand. The trial was over. The cleaner had become a queen. The silence that met Yuna's return from the caves was deeper and more profound than the one that had followed Tyke's declaration. It was not a silence of shock, but of acceptance. The Grand Minister had no more words. The law had been satisfied. The 3 warriors who had followed her into the caves told everyone who would listen about the human who read the dust and walked the crystal path they were too proud to take. Respect, slow and grudging at first, began to grow. The coronation was not held in the military parade grounds or the war hall. It was held in the grand concourse on the very floor Yuna had polished.
She did not wear armor or heavy jewels.
Her robe was simple and elegant, the color of deep space, and it flowed around her as she walked. General Tyke stood beside her, not in front of her. He wore his formal armor, but his posture was different. It was not the stance of a solitary commander, but of a partner. When the crown was placed on her head, it was not a spiked warrior's circlet. It was a delicate band of polished obsidian, mirroring the floor, set with a single glowing Heartstone from the cave. It was a crown that reflected her, not tried to change her. As queen, her first act was not to command a fleet or pass a harsh new law. She stood before the assembled leaders of the Krylix Empire and spoke in her clear, quiet voice. "The Krylix Armada is the strongest in the galaxy," she began. "It can break any world, but a broken world is a burden, not a prize. It gives no food. Its people cause trouble. It needs soldiers to watch it forever." She paused, letting them consider the endless cycle of conquest and rebellion. "There is another kind of strength. The strength to fix what is broken." She called it the Galactic Restoration. It was a simple idea, but to the Krylix it was a revolution. She proposed taking a small part of the vast military budget, the money used for new warships and weapons, and using it to heal planets that had been scarred by battle, to clean the water and soil of the world of the Xylosians whose art she had restored, to replant the forests of a world that had been burned in a rebellion. The war ministers were confused. This was not how an empire behaved. But General Tyke stood and gave his full support. "A queen who has passed the trial of ascension has spoken," he stated. "Her wisdom in the caves saved her where warriors failed. We will listen." And so, ships that once carried troops began to carry engineers and ecologists. Soldiers who knew only how to destroy were sometimes given new orders, to guard a team of scientists restoring a river. It was strange work, but many found a quiet pride in it. They were building something, for the first time in their lives. Yuna also opened the palace, not just the grand halls, but the lower levels, the gardens, the kitchens. She started cultural exchanges. Musicians and artists from Earth were invited to come and share their work. In return, she asked Krylix historians and builders to visit Earth and learn from its ancient cities. The palace, once a place of cold, silent power, began to fill with new sounds and new colors. The air smelled of alien flowers and earth spices, mixed with the familiar scent of ozone. One day, Yuna was walking through the halls with Chul. He was no longer just a cleaner. He was now the head of the palace stewards, in charge of all the maintenance and upkeep. He had been nervous about the promotion, but Yuna had simply said, "You know this place better than anyone. You just need a bigger title." They passed a young Krylix guard standing stiffly at his post. As Yuna passed, he bowed his head, not just in duty but in genuine respect. "My queen," he murmured. Chul looked at her after they passed. "You know, I'm still not used to that. Yuna smiled a little. Neither am I. They entered the grand concourse. The obsidian floor was, as always, a perfect mirror. A team of cleaners was working at the far end, their polishers humming softly. One of them, a young woman, saw a nearly invisible scuff mark near the base of a statue. She stopped her machine, knelt down and carefully buffed it away with a cloth. Yuna watched her, a deep feeling of peace settling over her. Nothing had changed, and everything had changed. She found General Teik, her husband the Emperor, in their chambers. He was looking at the star map, but he was not planning a battle. He was looking at a report from the Xylosian system, showing the improved water quality readings. He turned as she entered. "They are calling you the Queen of Menders," he said. There was no mockery in his voice, only pride. "It is a good title," Yuna replied, standing beside him. She looked at the star map, no longer a thing of fear, but a collection of places that could be helped, could be healed. He placed a large, warm hand on her shoulder. "You were cleaning the palace halls," he said, his voice soft. "I saw the care you took. I thought you were just good at your work. But I was wrong. You were not just cleaning a floor. You were practicing this." He gestured to the star map, to the entire empire. This was just a bigger hall. The scuff marks were just on a larger scale. Yuna looked out the window at the sprawling capital city below, then back at the man beside her. She had come from nothing, from the silent, invisible world of a cleaner. She had not fought her way to the throne with a sword. She had walked there with a polishing cloth and a quiet mind. She had shown that the hand that holds a tool gently can be stronger than the hand that holds a weapon. The empire was still vast, and there were many problems to fix. But as she stood there, Yuna knew that every clean floor, every healed world, every new song played in the palace was a victory. She had not taken the throne by force. She had earned it by seeing what everyone else overlooked, and by proving that the true power to rule was not the power to break, but the will to make whole.